Morning, folks. Welcome to another of our daily devotions. This morning we're in Psalm number 3, just beginning it. And before we get into the actual text of the psalm, it's important for us just to look at the title, because the title tells us that this was written at a specific time in David's life, a time when he fled from Absalom, his son. So Absalom had decided that he would get rid of his father and that he would become king. David had got word of this. He had seen that it was obvious that people were backing Absalom, and he had fled for his life from Jerusalem. And it's in that context that he writes Psalm 3. Very upsetting, very difficult circumstances, all arising as a result of problems within his family, very serious problems. And it's interesting that these problems arose as a direct result of David's affair with Bathsheba and his murdering of her husband Uriah. Troubles can come as a consequence of our sin. David did, of course, confess his sin to God. God did forgive him of his sin. There's no doubt about that. We see that in Psalm 32 and Psalm 51. But the reality is that whilst sin can be forgiven, nevertheless, we can often have to deal with the fallout or the consequences of sin. And David is discovering that there were consequences to the sin that he committed. Lots of people are against him. The situation looks bleak. It's also interesting to note that we've just read and thought about Psalm 2, and in Psalm 2, there are those who are saying, let us throw off their chains. In other words, the Lord and his anointed. They're trying to get rid of the Lord's anointed king. That's exactly what Absalom's trying to do. He's trying to get rid of King David in order that he might become king. He's put himself firmly into the place of God's enemies. He has gone over to the side of those who reject the Lord and his anointed. So David is in deep trouble in this situation. Family troubles, problems about his future. What does he do? Well, he turns to God in prayer. That's what this psalm is. It's a prayer to God. And that's exactly what we should do. Not only whenever we have troubles, but especially whenever we do have times when we're facing troubles. Of course, our troubles will be different from those of David, but nevertheless, whatever our troubles happen to be, we must turn to God in prayer. He should be our first port of call, not turning to God as a last resort. David has many who oppose him. If you look at verse 1, you'll see that the word many is repeated 3 times. We too, as God's people, have many opponents. People who will try to make life difficult for us, whether it's people in the place where we work, whether it's people in our class in school or in university, people with whom we socialise. We too have enemies. As Dale Ralph Davis says in his commentary on Psalm 3, David's opponents were many, they were mean, and they were mouthy. Lovely statement, because that's true of the opponents that we face. And often people's words can be very hurtful and very harmful. That's what David found. The people were saying concerning David, there's no salvation for him in God. God has abandoned him. Look at what's happening to David. Look, he's on the run. Surely if God was for him, these things wouldn't be happening in David's life. Maybe because of things that are happening in your life, you're wondering, is God for me? Well, David takes his troubles to God in prayer. And that's exactly what we should do. And see how David views God. First thing he says, you are my shield about me. The shield that David is speaking of wasn't the short shield that a warrior held on to in his arm and held up. This was a shield that went right around the fighter, completely surrounding the person. David saw God as such a shield, just the sort of God he needed in this situation. God protecting him when others were attacking him. Others are trying to destroy David, but David knew that God was his shield, completely surrounding him on every side in order to preserve him when his enemies attacked him and insulted him and sought to overthrow him. This is the God that we have. He is our shield. He is the one who protects us and surrounds us and keeps us safe. And David knew that he had such a God, and knowing that gave him confidence, even in such troubled times. This God is our God. You are a shield about me. No matter how many enemies we have, no matter how much trouble and danger we face, our God is the one who is our shield, and our God is the one who hears the prayers of his children. Hopefully that'll give you some confidence as you go into the day. We'll return to this psalm in our next study. Every blessing.